Welcome back, McFly subscribers. We will be continuing this month's caddis dry fly series today with the Goddard caddis, one of the highest floating dry flies out there. Now, I will discuss this fly and its uses further in the video, as I'm sure you all want to get started tying right away, but in case you haven't seen this channel before, this is McFly Angler.
Starts now.
Okay, let's start tying. Place a hook securely in your vise. For a hook, I'm using Risen's 9214 in size 12. This is a standard length nymph hook with a wide gap. And yes, this is a nymph hook for a dry fly, and that's because we will be pulling pretty hard to flare the deer hair, and we need that extra strength. We will also need some thread, and I'm using Vivas 10-aught in brown. This is a fairly thin, flat thread, but it is strong enough for tying this fly. Start your thread 2 hook eye lengths back from the hook eye, and then snip or snap off the thread. And then bring your thread down to the start of the hook bend. Now we need some deer hair. And I have this Primo strip in rusty brown. You can tie these in whatever color you want, and they do come in quite a few different colors, like this yellow. You also don't need a giant Primo strip. This natural color all-purpose swatch will work just fine. Or go with black. I mean, whatever color you want. We will want quite a bit of the hair. So let's separate out a large amount and cut it off the base. So it turns out this was a little bit too much, and you will see later in the video. So pinch the tips of the fiber, and then comb out the underfur and short fibers. Now let's cut the butt ends off square for a more even tie-in. However, here I realized this was too much fiber, so I'm pulling a little bit off. Okay, this is the right amount here. To make the tie-in a little easier, use a little bit of super glue, and something with a precision tip like this will be helpful. Place a small dot on top of the hook, back at the start of the hook bend. Then place the fur on top of the hook, with the butt end extending up to the initial tie-in spot, and push down through the hook slightly. Make 2 loose wraps to gather the fibers, and then cinch down to flare out the butt ends. But keep holding on to the tips. Wiggle the fiber side to side to seat it properly onto the hook, and set that super glue. Continue holding on to the tips and start winding up through the flared butt ends, cinching down with each wrap until you wrap up past the clump. Push back the butt ends and make a few more wraps to about the halfway point on the hook shank. Cut the tips off square, about a hook shank length back from where you tied in the deer hair, but don't let go of this. So turn this around in your fingers and cut the tips off square. Place the tips on top of the hook and make 2 loose wraps right at the center of the clump. Then cinch down and let go, allowing the deer hair to spin on the hook shank. Make a few more tight wraps, forcing those fibers to continue spinning, and then wrap up through the clump, cinching down with each wrap, until you reach about the initial tie-in spot with your thread. Now you can use your fingers to compress these fibers and push the front spun clump back a bit. Then I like to pull back any fibers that are facing forward and wrap back up onto them slightly. And this will ensure that they're not hanging over the hook eye. However, sometimes you might need to cut some of the fibers off. Then whip finish the fly with a 2-turn whip finish, just to hold the tie-in. I generally like to pull the fly off the vise to trim it. However, let me try to do this here so you can see it easier. Make an angled cut so it's more narrow towards the hook eye and tapered wider back to the back of the fly. Alright, I've got to take this out of the vise to do this. I can't say I didn't try though. Continue making angled cuts around the fly, shaping out a cone of sorts. Underneath is probably the hardest part to cut properly, and it might take a few extra cuts. And take some creativity to get a nice taper on the underside, since the hook bend is in the way. But it is possible, it just takes a little bit more effort. Cutting from back to front can also help as well. However, be very careful with these cuts, as you can easily cut too much this way. I would do this only at the end, and ensure that your scissors are angled perfectly for each cut. Now to finish the back end here. Gather up all the fibers like so, and then make an angled cut down on the top part of the fly, and then cut another smaller angled cut on the bottom part. Okay, this looks pretty good. However, I like to clean up the sides just slightly, and remove any of the fibers that are sticking out too far. But there we go. That's the cleaned up and trimmed body. Okay, well, almost. I noticed a few more of these hairs that got matted down, so I'm going to clean them up a bit. Alright, so you can continue trimming and cleaning this up until there's nothing left. And I had to tell myself to stop here, or I risked the same fate. Okay, let's start our thread again up by the hook eye and then snip or snap off the waist. We're going to bring the thread back as far as possible without catching too much of the deer hair. Now for the antenna, and for that we need one of these larger feathers down by the base of the rooster cape. Strip off all the fiber from the feather, leaving just the stem. And double up the stem to form a loop like so. Now, I don't like to waste materials, so I have this box filled with a bunch of feathers that I partially used, or that fell off a cape or saddle, and I would suggest to keep a box with spare materials like this, just in case there is a use for it later, and this feather could work, even though it's quite short. The same thing, strip off all the fiber and double up the stem. Okay, let's tie this doubled over stem in on top of the hook shank, and tie up to just shy of the hook eye, leaving a small space back from the hook eye. Make a wrap under the stem to help lift the antenna a bit, and clip off the tag ends of the stem, and then bring your thread back to right in front of the deer hair body. Now let's get that same cape and find a feather that is the same size as your hook. You can use a hackle gauge like this, which is very precise, or just wrap the feather around the hook to check. And the hackle should extend to about half past the hook point. And let's check that hackle gauge, and you can see it is just up to the beginning part of the size 12 mark. So I will use this feather. Now we need to prepare this feather for tie-in. Strip off some of the longer fibers down near the base of the feather to expose the stem, and the feather has two sides to it. The bottom, which is dull and lighter colored usually, and the top, which is usually more shiny. When looking down from the top, leave a little more fiber on the bottom, and then cut off the excess stem. This extra fiber on that one side is going to help when wrapping the feather. It will ensure that the feather doesn't get twisted and wrap the wrong direction. Tie this in right in front of the deer hair body with an X-wrap and then cinch down tight. Then start tying down the stem of the feather. However, first we need to cut it so it won't extend past the hook eye. Then continue tying over the stem with smooth wraps until you reach the antenna. And now we can start hackling the fly. Wrap the hackle as even as possible up your thread with touching wraps. Once you reach your thread, capture the hackle by wrapping over it twice. Then pull everything rearward and wrap in front of the hackle a couple times as well. This will help push some of the fibers back a bit if they happen to be sticking out forward. Now trim off the stem close and any fibers that got trapped and you couldn't wrap back. Pull up the antenna and make a wrap under it, and then whip finish your fly right under the antenna. And then trim off the thread as close as you can. Now let's cut the loop and shorten the antenna a bit. Now let's cement the head, and for that I really like the Solarez Ultra Thin. Just paint a little around the whip finish, and then cure it with your UV light, and the fly is now finished. Well, there we go, the finished Goddard's caddis. Oops, I saw the stray deer hair sticking out. Okay, now the finished Goddard's caddis. Well, this seems like it would be difficult to tie, and it does have some challenges. Once you get the hang of that deer hair body, the fly is actually quite simple. The whole body and wings are formed with the spun deer hair, and then it's just a matter of making the antenna and hackling the fly. In fact, you don't really need the antenna, but the original I believe came with them, so I wanted to show you how to add them. But if you skip the antenna, you can whip these out quite quickly as it's only that body and the hackle. And if you make these in steps, like creating a few bodies, and then come back and hackle them all, that assembly line type of production can really speed things up. And these are also incredibly buoyant. They're perfect for skipping across the top of the water, or fishing fast-moving riffles without worry of it sinking. But since it's a natural material and not foam, you still have to put floating on this, as it can get waterlogged without it. That back wing shape represents a caddis profile pretty well, and it really fools trout and other fish. It's a classic pattern that was created in the 1960s, according to Google, and apparently was made for stillwater fishing. But I find it does do very well in fast-moving rivers as well. In fact, you could even drop a nymph off the back of this, because it is so buoyant, and it will have no trouble holding it up. So give this a try, and please let me know in the comment section how this works for you, or if you have any fish stories of fishing with it in the past. Alright, well we are now 2 flies into the Caddis Dry Fly series for the month. I started off this series last week with the elk hair caddis, which is one of the most popular dry flies, let alone caddis dries, ever created. So go check out that video, which I will link to at the end of this video. Next week I plan on tying up a foam caddis for you, which is also a very buoyant dry fly, but because of the foam, it doesn't necessarily need floating. So make sure you're subscribed and click the bell notification so you don't miss any future videos like this foam caddis. By the way, I sell these fly boxes on Amazon with free shipping. They're thin enough to fit in most shirt pockets, or fit multiple boxes in a chest pack so you can organize your boxes by fly type. And the magnetic back compartments are strong as well, meaning the flies won't come out accidentally. See, I can even turn this upside down and shake the box, yet all the flies stay put. And this really helps when it's windy outside, so your dry flies won't go flying down the river when the wind blows. I will link below to my Amazon storefront if you're interested in picking up these boxes. Also, don't forget to check out my sponsor, Risen Fly. They made the hooks I use today, but they also make some of the best fly rods and reels for the money I have ever used. Best off, they're offering you all a discount. So if you're in the market for a new rod or a bunch of hooks or beads, go to www.risenfly.com and type in McFly at checkout and they'll give you 15% off of your first order with them. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked this video, please let me know by clicking the like button. Also, if you could share my videos with all your fishing friends, I would really appreciate it. I will see you on the next video. Now you go catch some fish.